All right, everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive. Today we're tackling a listener request, something that's kind of the backbone of, well, everything in pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
Computerized systems.
Yeah. Can't do much without them these days.
No kidding. And specifically, we're looking at how to make sure those systems are, reliable, trustworthy, because bad data, that's a recipe for disaster, especially when you're talking about, like, people's health.
Absolutely. That's where 21 CFR Part 11 comes into play. It's basically the rule book for electronic records and electronic signatures in the pharmaceutical world.
Okay, so 21 CFR Part 11. It sounds kind of technical.
It is a bit.
Could you break that down for us? What exactly is this thing, and why should our listeners care, in their daily lives?
Well, think about it. Almost every stage of developing and monitoring medications these days relies on computers, right?
Okay.
From the early lab work, like remember our deep dive on mutagenic impurities, to clinical trials, and even keeping tabs on how drugs are doing once they're actually out in the market. 21 CFR Part 11 is all about making sure the electronic data at every step of the way is accurate and tamper-proof.
So it's like setting the standards for a digital paper trail, the one that can't be messed with.
That's a great way to put it. And it gets really specific. Like, there are rules for what are called audit trails. Basically, they track every single action taken on a system. Imagine a detective, super meticulously documenting every step of their investigation.
Leaving no stone unturned.
Exactly. That's what an audit trail does, but digitally. So even if someone tries to, tweak the data or cover up a mistake, it's all going to be recorded.
No hiding. I like it. It's like having a watchful eye constantly looking over everyone's shoulder.
Right. And it's not just about catching intentional wrongdoing either. People make honest mistakes,
Happens to the best of us.
And being able to trace things back, see exactly where something went wrong, that's super crucial for fixing errors and, well, just making sure the data is reliable.
Makes sense. And what about those electronic signatures? Is that like just typing your name at the bottom of a document, or is there more to it than that?
Oh, it's way more than just typing your name. 21 CFR Part 11 has super strict requirements for electronic signatures. They need to be just as legally valid as a handwritten signature.
Oh, wow.
Which means using things like encryption and multi-factor authentication, those extra security codes you get on your phone.
Yeah.
All to make sure the signature is the real deal, that it hasn't been forged.
It's like those super high-tech security systems we hear about, making sure only the right people have access to, well, everything.
Exactly. Accountability and traceability, making sure everyone knows who approved what and when. 21 CFR Part 11 also covers what's called system validation. It's basically rigorously testing any computerized system before it can be used in drug development.
System validation. We've talked about that before in other contexts. So in this case, it's like making sure the software, the hardware, even the people using it are all playing nicely together, making sure everything's reliable, right?
Exactly. Think of it as an incredibly intense test drive.
Yeah.
You don't just assume a car is safe because it's, shiny and new.
Right.
You put it through the ringer, make sure the brakes work, the airbags, everything.
Safety first.
System validation is kind of like that, but for software and systems used in drug development.
So you're not just making sure the program, installs correctly. You're testing the entire system to make sure it spits out good data, protects sensitive information, and can even handle things like, power outages or system crashes.
You got it. Proving the system does what it's supposed to do, meets all the requirements, functions reliably in the real world. And this ties back to those specific sections of 21 CFR Part 11.
Right, like Section 314.52, which, if I remember correctly, is all about patent certifications and infringement. Always a hot topic in pharma.
Absolutely. And 314.94, focusing on ANDAs, abbreviated new drug applications.
Good.
Those are essential for, bringing generic drugs to market. 21 CFR Part 11 makes sure the data supporting those applications is just as trustworthy as the data for the brand name drugs.
So it's like leveling the playing field, making sure everyone's following the same rules, whether they're developing a brand new drug or a generic.
Precisely. And then there's Section 312.42, dealing with clinical holds. The FDA can actually halt a clinical investigation if there are concerns about patient safety or, you guessed it, data integrity.
Makes sense.
And 21 CFR Part 11 plays a big part in preventing those roadblocks by, making sure the computerized systems used in those trials are top-notch.
It's pretty amazing how this one regulation, 21 CFR Part 11, touches so many different parts of drug development.
It really does. It's like the foundation upon which everything else is built.
Now, you mentioned ICH-Q9 earlier. We've talked about risk management before on the show, but how does that apply to these computerized systems, specifically in drug development?
ICH-Q9 is a really great framework for figuring out, well, what could go wrong and how to prevent it or at least minimize the damage.
Right.
And when we talk about computerized systems, the risks, well, they're everywhere. Data breaches, system failures, even just, human error, any of those can mess up data integrity and have big consequences.
So it's about being proactive, thinking ahead, and having plans in place.
Exactly. One key area within ICH-Q9 is data backup and disaster recovery. What happens if, let's say, a system crashes or there's a natural disaster? What about all that precious research data? Companies need solid plans to make sure that data can be recovered quickly and completely.
Okay, so what kind of plans are we talking about here?
Well, things like redundant systems, backup stored off-site, and recovery procedures that are regularly tested. You can't just hope for the best. You got to have a plan B and maybe even a plan C.
Like having an escape route plan, just in case. What about those user access controls? We've talked about those when we were discussing controlled substances, but how do they fit into this bigger picture of computerized systems?
So user access controls, they're all about making sure that the only people who can get to the sensitive data, the important systems, are the people who are actually supposed to be there.
Right. Makes sense.
Strong passwords, those multi-factor authentication things, those codes you get on your phone,
You're cool.
and having very clearly defined roles and responsibilities for everyone.
So it's not just keeping the bad guys out. It's making sure that everyone on the inside is playing by the rules too, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's about stopping those accidental errors just as much as those, intentional breaches. Keeping that data clean, keeping it compliant with those regulations we were talking about, like 21 CFR Part 11.
And speaking of security, we got to talk about the big one, system security in general. In a world with all these constantly evolving cyber attacks, how are companies actually protecting these systems? I mean, these systems are holding really crucial information.
System security is a huge deal. I mean, especially when you think about how sensitive this drug development data is.
For sure.
We're talking firewalls, intrusion detection systems, all those security updates that, can be kind of a pain sometimes.
But they're important.
Super important. And having a solid plan in place for when, something does go wrong. Because it will. It's a constant back and forth, but the stakes are so high, you can't ignore it.
Yeah. Peace of mind is worth a lot, especially when we're talking about, people's health. Okay, so we've covered 21 CFR Part 11, ICH-Q9, risk management. Let's focus in on that key concept, data integrity. Why is this such a big deal?
Data integrity is all about making sure the data is accurate, it's complete, and it's consistent throughout its entire life, from the moment it's created all the way to when it's archived. It's like, making sure the foundation of a house is strong. If the data is shaky, well, everything built on top of it is going to be messed up.
So it's more than just following the rules. It's about making sure the information used to develop these life-saving drugs is solid, right? I mean, that just makes sense. But what if someone, intentionally messes with the data, tries to change it, or even just made stuff up? We talked about errors, but what about outright fraud? What kind of impact does that have in the real world?
That's a really important question. And unfortunately, data fraud does happen.
Yeah.
And it can have a huge impact on patient safety, scientific progress, even public trust in the whole system.
Wow. Well, let's break those down a little. Starting with patient safety, how does fake data affect the medications people are taking?
Okay, imagine a drug gets approved, right? But it's based on data that's been manipulated to make it seem like the drug is way more effective, way safer than it really is.
That's terrifying.
People could end up taking medication that doesn't actually work, or worse, could actually harm them. And that's especially scary when you think about some of the really powerful drugs out there. Like, think back to our episode on controlled substances.
Oh, yeah. Big consequences there. And I imagine it could also mess up research and development, right? How does data fraud affect scientific progress?
Oh, absolutely. Fraudulent data can completely derail research efforts. I mean, we're talking years of work, millions of dollars, just wasted. It's like building a skyscraper on a foundation of sand. It's just going to collapse eventually.
And then there's the loss of trust. If people can't trust the science behind their medicine, that's a huge problem.
You're exactly right. Data fraud just chips away at people's confidence in the entire healthcare system. People start to get skeptical of new treatments, maybe hesitant to participate in those clinical trials. It makes it much harder to do important public health work.
So the effects of one little lie can have ripple effects, way beyond just that one incident.
Absolutely. It weakens that foundation of scientific integrity and can set us back years. Data integrity is so much more than checking boxes. It's about ethics, it's about responsibility, and it's about being accountable to the patients, to science, to society as a whole.
Well said. We've talked about the what and the why, but I'm curious about the how.
Hmm.
What are companies actually doing to make sure they're meeting these requirements?
Yeah.
Building that culture of data integrity we've been talking about.
It's a tough challenge for sure. And it needs a combo of technology, but also, a real focus on how people behave.
Right.
On the tech side, companies are investing in some pretty sophisticated software systems, systems that are designed to specifically meet these 21 CFR Part 11 and ICH Q9 requirements.
So systems that automate those audit trails, handle the electronic signatures securely, keep that data safe.
Exactly. These systems make it a lot easier to follow the rules, but they're only part of the solution. It's like you can't just hand someone a car with airbags and expect them to automatically be a safe driver, right? You can't just rely on technology for data integrity. You need the human element too.
So how do we make sure the humans are doing their part?
Training. Companies are putting a ton of effort into training employees on these data integrity principles, walking them through 21 CFR Part 11, and showing them how to apply those ICH Q9 risk management strategies in their everyday work.
So even with all the fancy tech, people can still make mistakes, and they need to understand, the importance of handling data the right way.
Totally. But training is not enough on its own. You got to create a whole work environment where everyone values data integrity.
Okay.
That means clear expectations from the top, management. It means having good policies and procedures in place and just being open about any concerns anyone might have about the data.
So, a place where people feel okay speaking up if they see something that's not right or if they have questions.
Yeah.
Making data integrity a priority for everyone.
Yeah. Exactly that. Fostering transparency and accountability, everyone working together to make sure the data is reliable. And it's not a one-time thing. It's a constant process. You got to be vigilant, you got to adapt, and you got to keep getting better.
Always improving.
Exactly. Companies need to be on the lookout for risks, coming up with ways to minimize them, adapting to new challenges, and making sure their systems and processes keep up with all the changes in technology. And it's not just about what's happening inside one company. Collaboration, sharing knowledge across the whole industry, that's important too.
So companies are working together to raise the bar for everyone.
Exactly. Through all these industry groups and professional organizations, companies are sharing what works, talking about the challenges, and coming up with new solutions.
I like that.
It's a team effort to make sure the data that all of drug development relies on, that it's reliable.
That's great. It's like everyone's working towards the same goal, realizing that they're all part of something much bigger.
Speaking of the big picture, I'm wondering about the future. We've talked about data integrity as it is now, but with all this new technology like artificial intelligence, machine learning, things that are changing so fast, what kind of challenges and opportunities are we going to face in the future?
That's a fascinating question. A lot of experts are thinking about that right now.
I'm sure.
AI and machine learning, they have the potential to totally revolutionize drug development. I mean, speeding up drug discovery, making treatments more personalized, all that.
It's pretty mind-blowing.
But this new power comes with new responsibility, right?
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to data integrity.
So it's like a double-edged sword. On one hand, we can analyze tons of data, maybe even uncover patterns we wouldn't have seen before. But on the other hand, we're relying on the integrity of that data, and we could be opening ourselves up to new vulnerabilities. Exactly. As we start using these powerful technologies more and more, we got to be aware of potential biases and how tough it can be to make sure their outputs are actually valid. And we can't forget about keeping humans in the loop, making sure there's still oversight and accountability.
It sounds like we're stepping into uncharted territory here.
We are, in a lot of ways.
But with great power comes great responsibility, right?
Absolutely. Things are changing all the time, but I'm hopeful. If we plan carefully, if we have strong safeguards in place, and if we stay committed to those ethical principles we talked about, I think we can use these powerful technologies while still keeping data integrity front and center.
It's an exciting time to be in the pharmaceutical world. Lots of challenges, lots of opportunities, but at the end of the day, it's all about making people healthier.
Couldn't agree more. And as we figure out this new landscape, those data integrity principles, they're going to be our guide, making sure the medicines we develop are safe, effective, and developed the right way.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about. But it seems like we're at a turning point, and we need to make sure we're ready for whatever comes next.
Definitely. And in all this excitement about the new stuff, it's important to remember, why we're doing this at all.
Right.
It's about helping people, making their lives better.
Exactly. All these rules, all these systems, they're not just like theoretical things. They have real-world consequences for real people.
That's right. And that's why this whole idea of data integrity is so important. Making sure the medicines we're developing are actually safe and effective. It takes everyone working together, researchers, regulators, companies, even the patients themselves.
That's a great point. Well, I think that about wraps up this deep dive.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking us through all of this. It's a complex topic, but you made it really clear, and it's been super fascinating to learn about.
Well, thanks for having me. I always love talking about this stuff.
And to our listener, we hope this has given you a better understanding of just how important computerized systems and data integrity are in the world of drug development. Remember, knowledge is power, so keep asking questions, stay curious. Until next time, thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.